Good afternoon, everybody. I see we have some attendees rolling in. We're so excited to be here together today. As you're joining, feel free to say hello back in the chat and share where you are joining from, along with your congregation or organization if you'd like, and maybe why you're here today. My name is Kelsey Herbert, and I'm the National Campaigns Director with Faith and Public Life Action. And I'm so happy to welcome you to our Holy Recovery Campaign webinar launch event. Faith and Public Life Action works to elevate and amplify the work and voices of people of faith and faith leaders like you all to advance just policies at the state and federal level that affirm our values of dignity and justice for all. We'll start today's gathering with a grounding meditation and song from Paisha Thomas, Faith and Public Life's Ohio racial justice organizer. We'll then from there move into a conversation that explores what is a holy recovery and how our faith draws us into a prophetic space between Faith and Public Life CEO, Reverend Jennifer Butler, and the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis of Middle Collegiate Church of New York City, and Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland-Toon of the National Council of Churches. Once we listen to this vision of what is a holy recovery for our nation, we'll hear from some policy experts around multiple issues of how we can get there. We'll listen to Lina Bracero from SCIU, Frank Clemente with Americans for Tax Fairness, Patrice Lawrence of the UndocuBlack Network, and Sister Quincy Howard of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. So we have a stacked program today. This is the launch of our campaign, Holy Recovery, and we're really inviting you all to join us in this campaign as we advocate and build a holy recovery together. So thank you so much, Paisha, for being with us, and take it away.
Thank you. And in the spirit of holy recovery, this song is called The Chicken and the Rent. Takes the night shift on Fridays to make up for the work she missed, for basketball and tumble class and spelling bees to make 3 happy kids. They don't pretend to notice how she paints their story golden. They trust in her, she gonna work it out, because they know her stable shoulders in suburbs trade for safety fame, a coin she thought she had to spend. She weighs the cost and she makes the choice. Is it the chicken or the rent? He wrangles his mind in each moment. He tried to silence all the voices. The doctor got a remedy, but not today, because the price is more than what he can pay. He don't pretend to notice anybody's frozen shoulder. He trusts his world to be safe and worry-free, yeah, while his mama works to make it be in suburbs. Thank convenience gain on tomorrow's borrowed dividends. They weigh the cost and they make the choice. Is it the chicken or the rent? But won't be a this or a that. Poor people rising up, we're fighting back. Mama, don't you worry, 'cause this tide is turning. Pretty soon, we gonna get the chicken and the rent. I said, and the rent, and the rent. Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm sure everyone's at home clapping, waving. Anyone who gets to hear Paisha Thomas sing in our ministry of music is blessed. So thank you, Paisha, for joining us and grounding us this afternoon, this morning. Okay, now we're gonna jump into our first panel. So Reverend Jennifer Butler, CEO of Faith and Public Life Action, please take it away with a beginning reflection before our first panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And wow, Paisha, thank you for that story, for just bringing it home to people's everyday lives. People shouldn't have to be making these horrific choices between chicken and rent. One day there won't be a this or a that, she's saying. And that's exactly what the Holy Recovery Campaign is about. We can create an economy where everybody thrives, where there is enough for everyone, where we live out of abundance and not scarcity. And to do that, we need a democracy where everybody's voice is heard. And that is fundamental to what we as people of faith believe and are mandated to do through our holy texts. We live in tumultuous times, to say the least. When I think of recovery, you can think about it in terms of what we've all been through for the past year and a half, 2 years. You can think of it in terms of COVID, and a lot of people do, but I think of it in terms of this whole nation's history. We have to fundamentally change how our democracy functions, and closely related to that, how our economy functions. And so we have to level the playing field, and we have to be sure that everybody is included, and that we're not creating a society that's based on systems of oppression and hierarchy, and that we are dismantling that. And that's what these two bills do. Sometimes you look at bills. One is the For the People Act, which will reform and make our law, protect our democracies and end voter suppression. The other one is the American Jobs and Families Plan. These are two visionary bills that are just grounded in our moral traditions. And we face these voter suppression laws, so we desperately need For the People Act. And we have an economy that kills. That's what Pope Francis said a couple of years ago. And I fundamentally believe that our economy is an economy that kills. And during COVID, we have seen disparities increase all the more for people of color in particular, and for women. And we need to address that. The rich are getting richer, even in a pandemic. And those who are vulnerable, made vulnerable by our racist and sexist policies, are really suffering. So what keeps me going in these times? The vision that I keep meditating on in these times when we're up against so much is this vision in Isaiah 43, where the prophet Isaiah, the people have been through 70 years of oppression and captivity. They have no hope whatsoever left. And Isaiah, the prophet, dares to say a word from God, which is, "Behold, I do a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." I think a lot of us can relate to that wasteland part. We have been through a lot in these recent years, but God promises to make streams in the wasteland. God lifts up a vision, again, of human dignity and abundance, and God works through us to make that happen. And I was just thinking, one, sit with that vision, let it sink in. This is what God wants for us. This is the mandate of our faith traditions, but it is the beautiful vision that God calls us into, and how wonderful it is to be a part of that vision. And I was thinking of how many times I have sat with these two women that are going to join me for the panel, and we have gone up against impossible odds. Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland-Toon and Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, we fought the attempt to kill the Affordable Care Act. We fought that off. And I remember thinking to myself, this is futile, but I'm going to fight anyway. And we won that battle. We threw down and we won that battle. And, you know, there'll be times when we feel daunted in this campaign of holy recovery, but we are going to win this. And we are filled with God's vision for that and motivated and given courage to press on anyway. So 2 important bills, 1 campaign, holy recovery, to change our democracy, prevent voter suppression, and then to restore an economy that is for everyone, that works for everyone, and that makes sure that the wealthy pay their fair share in taxes and that all of us can thrive and survive. We don't have to choose between the chicken or the rent, to get back to Paisha's song. So without further ado, I want to introduce these 2 panelists that I mentioned. Reverend Dr. Leslie Copeland-Toon is the Chief Operating Officer of the National Council of Churches, and she is one of America's most notable ecumenical leaders. And Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis is the Senior Minister of Barble Collegiate Church in New York City and author of a forthcoming book, Fierce Love, A Bold Path to a Better Life and a Better World. She also organizes the annual Revolutionary Love Conference, which you have to attend. So a question for you 2. The pandemic exposed our nation's inequalities, and the Trump administration exposed our nation's fragile democracy. But we're calling for this holy recovery to heal and repair our communities from long-standing injustices. What would you define as a holy recovery? What would a holy recovery look like? And why is it important for people of faith to really invest in democracy reform and economic justice? What's this theological moral vision that we're about today? It's a big question. Reverend Copeland-Toon, would you like to go first?
I was going to defer to Dr. Lewis, actually.
That's how we do. That's how colleagues do. We're like, no, you know you. No, really you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and our friends in this incredible institution for visionary planning, visionary conversation. I'm so excited to be with you today. I just am so excited to think about holy recovery. Holy recovery, Batman. You know, that just grabs me. You know, what do we want for the world? What do we want for the world? And you know, I wrote this book, Fierce Love, during this pandemic. I started writing in July and I finished in February. You know, with all the brokenheartedness that all of us have, the loss of life, the loss of opportunity, the shutting down of our neighborhoods, the closing up of our congregations, the inability to hug the people you love, being separated from grandchildren. It was a weird time, I have to be honest with you, to be writing a book, but I think it was a God's time to be writing a book. You know, I got a deal, I write a book, it's due in February. Our church burned down in December, some of you know, and I'm just trying to contextualize what I'm going to say theologically, that I really did spend a lot of time reflecting on what's love got to do with it. You know, what do we mean by this kind of love that guides our ethic? What is revolutionary about love? What is fierce about love? And darned if God didn't take me all up into Mark's gospel, which is not yummy and sexy. You know, it's like, you know, Mark's gospel was like, you know, and I'm fascinated that at the beginning of Mark's gospel, if we can suspend our Western modern beliefs that might make us not see it, he really is putting kingdom of God versus kingdom of world, kingdom of Christ versus kingdom of world, kingdom of Jesus versus kingdom of Rome. And he puts Jesus in these, like, there's no nativity, you know, none of that. It's like, hey, beginning of the gospel, the good news. And what's Jesus doing? Kicking evil's butt in the temple. Forgive me for paraphrasing, right? He's in the temple, and like these like preachers are in the temple. They're not preaching, because if they were preaching, why are the demons there? The demons are in the temple and Jesus is putting them out, binding the strong man, right? Really making a case that a house divided will not stand. So I want to say a holy vision for holy recovery. If we as Christians, I'm going to just be particular for a second, are going to follow the brown, poor, Jewish, refugee, homeless, Palestinian Jew, that guy isn't for this incredible disparity in wealth. Like, what? How did that happen? A holy vision means everyone has enough. Everyone has healthcare. Everyone has food on the table. Every mother's child is safe. Like, what happened? That Christianity became capitalism with a cross on it. And so I'm saying we have to get back to the call on our lives as faith leaders. Love your neighbor as yourself is in every major religion, not just Christian, right? The ones we can't pronounce is love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Don't withhold that which you need. So I'm trying to think about the ubiquitous call, Jen, that we're issuing to all people of faith to say, neighbor love. Neighbor love is fierce. Neighbor love is Ubuntu. Neighbor love is let's take care of each other's babies. They all belong to all of us. And I think that's the building block of a holy vision for recovery. Love neighbor, love self, and the same way.
Love it.
That's long, sorry about that.
That's perfect. Neighbor
that was
love.
Great. So I love that. And I think, I always think about when we talk about love, people always talk about it as if it's sentimental, right? But what I see in my Christian scriptures is that it isn't just sentimentality, right? It's sentimentality coupled with action, coupled with belief, coupled with how we take care of each other. And that is a requirement. It's not just, it doesn't make you a good person. It's because of who God is that we pour out unto others. I think about Deuteronomy 10, where it actually quotes Micah, which we're always quoting, but Micah's quoting Deuteronomy, saying, what does God require of us, right? And it talks about the orphan and the widow and the stranger. And when I think about holy recovery after so much has been lost, right? Like there's for faith leaders, especially those in pastoral ministry, we have to deal with the loss, right? That what the loss has revealed, right? Like not only who's not here, but who's lost a home, who's lost income, who's lost their perspective even on life, and how we recover from this whole tragedy. I mean, so much was revealed through this pandemic. Who's essential workers and who's not. And if you're an essential worker, why do you get paid like, you're just doing somebody a favor who has not enough to pay you? So there's so much, I think, that has been uncovered and revealed. And part of the recovery, according to how I interpret the scripture, is yes, it's a new thing, but it's a just thing, right? It's not just new, it's also just. It's also making sure that the things that the truth that has been revealed to us is not ignored, but is acted upon, so that we have policies and practices that show that we have embraced a new thing, that we have been through something, that we have come out on the other side, that we're going to take care of those children at the border, that we're going to take care of the grocery store workers, that we're going to take care of not just the teacher, but the teacher's aide, not just the nurse, but the nurse's aide, that we're going to take care of those people in our society which is everybody, like who doesn't deserve to be cared for? It cannot be, just that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, which is really where we are now after this pandemic. Like companies like where we buy our books, I won't say the name, but in some others, their profits have tripled, quadrupled, and then you have this whole host of people on the verge of being homeless. And so as people of faith, it is our responsibility to make sure that those who are on the verge of losing their homes are taken care of, because we believe in God's abundance, that there is not lack. We know we have enough in this country. We know we can do it in this country, and that we're committed as a holy recovery to making sure that we do it. Not just that we talk about it, not just that we shake our heads, not that we know the truth and act like we don't know the truth, but that we're actually acting upon it.
What are you all seeing in your communities? Reverend Jackie, your church is recovering from a severe fire. Leslie, you're overseeing an ecumenical body of congregations and churches, and what's at stake for them in these two bills and in the holy recovery? Like, how does this impact your communities directly on a daily basis, or any of us for that matter, but particularly people of color who are hardest hit, and women as well.
I'll just say, Jen, that these bills represent our ethical vision. These bills represent the call in our lives. These bills represent what we believe it means to be faithful. We ubiquitously, human beings. There's, anybody of faith, practicing of faith, Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Sikhs, in a faith world isn't imagining that someone should sit up on a hill and someone else is in the gutter. That's not what it is. So these bills represent the vision of a moral and just society. Budgets that are moral documents, these bills are moral documents. I think there's something about education that is important for our communities. This campaign's important. So mommy in the grocery store feeling frustrated feels like she's not alone. There's something else she can do, that there are people across the country thinking like she's thinking about how we can make it better. So I think that's one part of it. I think the other thing is, two more things maybe quickly. One is, we've got to disavow ourselves that faith is not political. Of course, faith is political. Christians say Jesus wasn't physical. I'm like, which Jesus are you talking about that wasn't political? What are you talking about? Of course, our faith is political. It's about palace. So also to re-educate people to think how you vote, what you pay attention to, what you socialize, what you share, how you buy your books. There's a whole campaign right now about indie books, where you spend your money, where you live. All of these decisions are faith and politic decisions. Oh, that's your organization. That works really well, doesn't it? So these are faith and political decisions, so not to separate them. And the third thing I would say is to look for models of things that are happening. We don't have to recreate the wheel. Middle Church made a 10% commitment of our budget to cancel rent, and another 10% of our budget to Black Lives Matter. And right now, all systems are doing budgets for the next fiscal year. What do you want lay leaders for your clergy to be budgeting? What do you want the budget committee to be thinking? Use your voice there to say your own system can look like the vision of God's reign that you want it to look like, by the way you spend your money, by who leads, so that we put into practice here in the micro and in the macro, the holy vision that we have for recovery, and we're not alone as we do it.
Beautiful. Starts right here, close to home, and then expands out. Reverend Leslie Copeland-Toon.
No, yeah, that's really awesome. I think put your money where your mouth is, right? Like let's do this thing in word and in deed, and not, we got to have some meat to our talk, something that people can hold on to. And I think, when we think about the attacks on voting in a democracy, I think as people of faith, it is our responsibility to step up and to say, this is a matter of human dignity. We have a responsibility as citizens, and because of our faith, we exercise that responsibility as faithfully as we can, and we want everybody to have that same opportunity to do that. And so this attack on voting and democracy is not detached from holy recovery. It's not detached from the economic recovery, from the pandemic, or the educational recovery. We know that there's a huge gap that's happening in terms of who stayed in school and who didn't, who had access to computers and who didn't, who had access to broadband, et cetera, and who didn't. And so all of these things are really interconnected, as Martin Luther King once said. And I think the pandemic has brought it to the forefront in a way that we may not have, it may have taken us years to get to the realizations that we've seen over the past year. But the responsibility is, and I feel this particularly as people of faith, that we have a role and a responsibility to lead in showing the importance and significance of ending so many of these disparities, of doing what you're doing, casting a vision for a holy recovery, for something that evens the playing field, that says these are all of God's people. We're going to treat them equally. We're going to equitably. We're going to make sure that everybody has access to the same things. And it takes a commitment and it takes time, but we got to start today. We got to start now. We can't, kick this ball down the road any further than my God, if we don't do it now, what will it take, we don't have any more time. So this is the time, this is the moment for us to do it. And these bills just get us a little closer to, really making sure just think about, I know the policy people, but childcare, just like the simple things, citizenship for immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. Like there's just some simple things that we can be doing to make this more just than it is, to make it look differently so that the next pandemic, by God, that we will be better prepared, healthcare, that people will have access, that it'll look completely different than it did this time.
It's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, it really comes down to our daily lives. It impacts all of us, whether we have childcare, whether we have jobs, whether we have healthcare, whether we have the right to vote and to choose our elected officials. And we know that there are big corporate actors funding the anti-democracy efforts and the voter suppression. And those are the same actors that are going to benefit from an economy that channels resources up to the very top and leaves the rest of us underpaid and under-resourced and unprotected. Thank you both so much. And we're going to start to move into the policy depths, but Reverend Copelantine, you got us into that conversation, as did Reverend Dr. Leslie and Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis. So grateful for you and so excited to get your book on fierce love. We need that in the world today. And we'll now move on. I turn things back to Kelsey. Thank you all for your vision.
So good to see you. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Yes, God bless.
Thank you all so much for that incredibly beautiful conversation, setting the tone for giving us permission to vision and to think big, and that we don't have to, we can think outside of the bounds of what we only think is possible based on what we've seen. As people of faith, we can think prophetically, we can cast a vision based on what we believe we are being called into. So I just want to see some action in the chat, invite you to reflect for a moment about what inspired you from the conversation that you just heard, or for you to share with us, what do you believe needs to be included in a holy recovery? I'm going to give a brief overview, a little bit more detail about the campaign, but we want to hear from you about how you see this based on what you heard, and what are you visioning right now? There's so much more we can envision for ourselves, for our communities, for our families. We can think bigger because we know we're being invited by our faith leaders and by our faith traditions to dream and envision more for ourselves, because we know it's possible when we come together. So please feel free to add to the chat. And we'd love to see more about what you're thinking in this time. So what inspired you from this conversation, and what do you believe needs to be included in a holy recovery? And then I want to go a little bit deeper into the framework of the campaign. So thinking about what, as people of faith, do we believe? We believe that a life of abundance and dignity is what God wants for all of us. No matter what we look like, where we live, how much we earn, we all deserve to rest assured at the end of the day, the people we love have everything they need. And our elected officials have a moral responsibility to build a holy recovery that lays the foundation of a flourishing life and declares that we're all worth investing in. And as we heard, democracy is how we hold them accountable to this. When we have the power to determine who represents us, we can secure public investment that helps us all provide for our families and hold our heads high. But we know right now our nation's policies are morally off track. Workers and families in our communities face deep debt and impossible dilemmas because of economic and immigration policies that serve the wealthy few at everyone else's expenses. Brown, Black, Asian, Native people, especially women, have always been discriminated against and excluded by our economic and democratic systems throughout history. And we know and we heard that the pandemic starkly exposed that systemic discrimination, that it's still happening today. And we know our immigrant neighbors continue to face uniquely steep barriers in the pursuit of recognition of dignity and abundance. So we are calling for us to come together to push Congress to pass laws for a holy recovery. And there are policies on the table right now that can make a difference in all of our lives. The American Jobs and Family Plan declares that every person is worth investing in. It will make essential infrastructure of family life, including childcare, school, healthcare, more affordable. It creates good jobs and better paying workplaces, from construction to care services. And it lays a foundation on everything with roads and bridges, clean energy, broadband. And it gets funded by stopping the wealthiest few from dodging taxes and paying their fair share. And we've heard an economy that serves all people and a democracy that represents all people, those go hand in hand. And that's why we're also encouraging you to join with us in calling the passage of For the People Act, S1. S1 tears down new voting barriers that target Black, Brown, Native, and Asian voters, and attacks on votes are an attack on human dignity. So we're looking to join and partner with you to work on passing these bills to uphold human dignity, to declare that we're all worth investing in and that we all deserve a voice in our government. So to make this holy recovery happen, we're calling on you to join with us, and we want to join with you in advocating together for wholeness for our communities. But it's going to take some work to get there, and we need to know a little bit more information too. So I'm really excited to bring in our next panel of policy experts, people who are working on very specific issues within this movement for wholeness for our communities. And so I want to begin with Lina Bracero from the SEIU, who's championing care services and our care services workers. We all come into contact with care service workers in our lifetime, and we know that care is essential. The care service industry is predominantly made up of people of color and immigrants that provide assistance to the elderly, children, and hospitals. And so, Lina, I'm curious if you can join us and share with us how the American Jobs and Families Plan proposals could transform the lives of our care services workers and families.
Thank you, Kelsey, and all of you at Faith in Public Life for inviting me as an extension of the 2.2 million members that we service at SEIU to this panel and to this conversation. Sorry, I have a little thing in my throat, so I apologize for that at the forefront. At the moment, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create the most racially diverse, resilient middle class that this country has ever seen with the administration that we have at hand. Home care workers, who, as you noted, are primarily Black, Latina, Asian, and immigrant women. They're putting everything on the line, and they were doing so during the pandemic and beforehand, to care for aging adults, people with disabilities, and yet all too often they're living on the edge of poverty and struggling to make care, to take care and to have care for their own families, just as the song in the beginning of the panel. What we know is that with President Biden's proposal, it includes a $400 billion investment in our nation's essential care infrastructure, which would be expanding home and community-based care services. And what that means is that we'd be creating up to 1 million new home care jobs to address the rising demand to care for older Americans and for people with disabilities. It would be giving home care workers specifically the choice to join together in a union and collectively bargain that would allow for better wages, benefits, training, healthcare, better work conditions. And of course, it ensures taxpayer dollars go to good union jobs, and they go towards good union jobs that are paying a living wage and ensuring quality and affordable care for the families that are servicing other families. And then finally, it would also serve as a targeted jobs program for the very workers who have been hit the hardest during this economic recession. Women of color, there's a trend here. Women of color who are the overwhelming majority of this country's care work, as we all sort of know on this call. You may have seen a couple of days ago in the Intelligencer, there's a story about LaTanya Jones Costa. And the reason I bring her up is because a robust investment in care work would really be life-changing, specifically for someone like LaTanya, right? She's a home care worker, a mom who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She's been working in home care for over 23 years. In fact, considers it a calling. She makes sure seniors and people with disabilities have quality of life. She's helping them with their baths, getting prescriptions, serving as their confidants. Sometimes folks are alone, to some degree, housekeepers and cooks. And she's been fighting for $15 and a union for a while now, because at the moment she's making $10 an hour for the services that she renders to her client. And to paint you a clearer picture, that's only 50 cents higher than when she started this work in 2007. So in 2007, she was making $9.50. And in today's economy, she's making $10. It just isn't enough to support her own needs and her family's needs. And, you know, through the thick of COVID, many families, as we've been discussing, have had to cut back on people coming into their homes. So she lost hours, you know, for work through her agency. She's struggled to get by, and she's had to make difficult choices of exposing herself even further to COVID by driving Lyft, or essentially not getting paid for her work. I'll drop the story in the chat so everyone can see it. It's really powerful, and would love for you all to take a look at it. And then finally, I do want to share that the Biden's American Jobs Plan is the first jobs program focused on a workforce that is driven primarily by women of color, who, as you all know, were excluded from basic rights and labor protections for decades because of systemic racism. This plan will truly transform their lives, and in fact, entire communities all over the country, in every single zip code, we believe, urban and rural. Our campaign is focused specifically on home care workers, but we do cross the spectrum of childcare, paid leave, et cetera. And I'm happy to provide more details at the end or in the chat of all the ways you as faith leaders who know these families well and know what the crippling cost of care can be for aging parents, aging grandparents, et cetera, what we can do as a community to tell Congress that they need to act now.
Thank you so much, Lena, and for the work of SCIU and championing care services. Our care service providers are our family members, our neighbors, and deserve to be invested in as well. And care is essential. So thank you so much, Lena. Next, I want to invite Frank Clemente with Americans for Tax Fairness. And Frank is a champion for tax fairness. And so Frank, the American Families and American Jobs Plan declares that every person is worth investing in. From childcare to nutritional assistance to climate solutions and education, the plan will change the lives of families across the country. Right now, everyday Americans are paying to help keep our communities strong, but the wealthy and corporations aren't paying their fair share. So what needs to happen so we can fully fund our vision for a holy recovery? Frank, we're going to try to get you unmuted.
Very sorry. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, thanks a lot. I really appreciate being here with you and Faith in Public Life today. And I want to pick up where Lena left off. The program she's talking about, which is the Biden American Families Plan, it costs it's actually in the American Jobs Plan. It costs $400 billion over 10 years. And just to put that in perspective for a minute, we've done a whole lot of reports in the last year during the pandemic on billionaire wealth growth. We have 650 billionaires here in America, and their wealth has grown by 55% during the first 13 months of the pandemic by $1.6 trillion. 650 people, their wealth went up $1.6 trillion. That is 4 times the amount of the caregiving program that Lena is talking about that the Biden administration has proposed. It boggles the mind. It really staggers it when we think about it. And so we're very much leading the charge here to integrate the tax fairness issue into the jobs and investment issue in this debate. We're really at a historic moment. President Biden has done something I think none of us thought he would do. It's pretty remarkable. He's put forward 2 plans. We've kind of blended them together as one. His economic program, Build Back Better program, whatever, he puts too many labels on these things, but it's $4.2 trillion in new investments over 10 years in all the things that we care about. It's not as much as we need. We think we need at least $10 trillion, but it's $4 trillion is a huge down payment. And he pays for that through taxes, through raising, most of it is paid for by raising revenue on the rich and corporations, what we call fair share taxes. We put this leaflet that's up here on the screen together just to give you the sense of how important this is, how big it is. On the left is the pie chart of Biden's investments, $4.2 trillion. And look at how it's divided. 28% of it goes to what we call the caring economy, to healthcare, to housing and nutrition. So more than 1/4. Another 24% goes to the traditional kinds of things you talk about as infrastructure, transportation, but also there's a big chunk there for green economy, green energy, things like electric vehicles, et cetera. 17% is the working families tax credits, and some IRS funding of $80 billion. The working families tax credits are the child tax credit, the EITC, the improvements that were made in the American Rescue Plan just back in March. Those are the things that, back in, I guess it was March. Those are the things that are reducing poverty. They're only 1 year, but the estimate is that you can reduce poverty by childhood poverty by as much as 40%. And so Biden is proposing to fund these for at least another 5 years. That's all he's put the revenue in for. And then, as you can see, 16% for education, 15% for his kind of manufacturing. So that's how the pie is divided. And there's so much in the favor of all these things we care about. And it's such a huge stake now in this debate before Congress. And on the revenue side, he raises about $3.6 trillion. You can see the big chunk of that comes from corporations, increasing the tax rate on corporations from 21% to 28%. Just for perspective, it used to be, before President Trump came along, it was 35% on corporations. He slashed it all the way down to 21%. That's a 40% tax cut for corporations, which were extremely profitable at the time he put his tax cut in. So we're bringing it halfway back. And we're still having to fight like heck in Congress to get that, even among Democrats. And those making over $400,000, he doesn't do enough, in my opinion, to raise taxes on the rich. He's only raising taxes on the rich by about $800 billion. But let me say, raising taxes on corporations raises taxes on the rich. So I don't want to dismiss that. The rich are 90% of the stock in America is owned by the top 10%. More than 50% is owned by the richest 1%. So you raise corporate taxes, you are directly raising taxes on the rich. But in terms of other indirectly raising taxes on the rich, in terms of raising taxes on the rich, he has 2 big proposals there. One is reforming the capital gains tax system. That is the taxes that people pay when they sell an asset, when they sell a stock, when they sell a business that they're invested in, when they sell real estate, not your home, but other real estate. And so he does a major overhaul of that and raises a lot of money, and it's really good kinds of reforms. And the 20% of the revenue he's proposing would come from just much greater IRS enforcement, focusing on tax cheats that are at the higher end and on corporate tax cheats, and increasing the reporting requirements so that a lot of people make income that's off the books. It's not W-2 income, it's through their pass-through businesses. He changes reporting requirements to capture all that. So that's kind of the picture. Let me just put this a little bit more in perspective. We really have this historic opportunity to address inequality in a profound way, to address racial wealth gap in a profound way, to really begin to create the foundation for an economy that works for all of us. Our estimation, our belief is that is based on raising taxes, making corporations and the rich pay their fair share. Our slogan is, let's create an economy that works for all of us by making corporations and the rich pay their fair share. We think that this is for 40 years, we've lived in this narrative around trickle-down supply-side tax cuts. It started with Ronald Reagan, continued with George W. Bush, and then Trump got his trickle-down supply-side tax cuts as well. You know, that was a totally bipartisan push in Congress. No Democrats, all Republican support. 7,000 corporate lobbyists pushed that bill through in 2017. We can change the longer range, big picture narrative, get away from that restricted trickle down notion and have a much more expansive support for public investments, that if we, that we can get to a place of creating an economy for all based on big, bold public investments financed by raising taxes on the rich and corporations or making them pay their fair share. So that's kind of our vision. That's our narrative. If we can win it in this year in the fight over the Biden Build Back Better agenda, it becomes the dominant narrative discussion next year. In an election year, candidates have to defend this stuff, and it becomes, we begin to change, the ship is turning direction. It takes a while to get it there, but we could have 40 years of our agenda, of our very powerful pro-growth, addressing inequality, closing the racial wealth gap, all that kind of great agenda moving forward. So my last appeal to you would be on the action thing, is for you to think hard and work hard to integrate this tax fairness perspective into the public education work you do. It's so easy to talk about investments. Those are great things. That's all the sugar. The taxes, people look at taxes too much as the vinegar. We can't look at it that way. We've got to look at it as really sugar too. It's a winning issue. It's a winning message. We're Biden's pollsters polling for us. He's out there proselytizing that this is a way that we win on this issue. We can't be on defense on taxes anymore. We've got to be on offense because we're going to be attacked on it anyway. We're happy to do presentations to your groups or coalitions, and please get on our mailing list. I'll put my email address in the chat, and you can go there, but also go to our website, americansupporttaxfairness.org. Just sign up under the hero image, and you will get regular content from us via email as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate you being here and laying out a little bit more about what is possible if we can raise revenue and as we should. So it is possible and we can do it. So thank you for setting that vision. And next, I'm excited to welcome Patrice Lawrence, co-director of the Undocu Black Network. And as we envision a holy recovery that builds strong communities, we know this must include justice for immigrant communities. But too often, and even right now, immigrants are being left out. We saw that with stimulus checks. We see it in so many areas. So for you, Patrice, what does a holy recovery look like that centers immigrant communities?
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and my pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Patrice Lawrence. I am co-director of Undocu Black. We're a network of Black and undocumented folks, including myself, led by and for this. And thank you for this conversation. I think there are three main things. I think one, we cannot create more refugees, just really the simplest way that I could possibly put it. So we're not mentioned explicitly in the bills, but we know that money from this bill is still going to facilitate wars and conditions that continue to create more refugees that then come to America or need to go elsewhere and don't have the resources that they need. Two, that we must welcome with dignity everyone, and this means ending the expulsions and the deportations of people. We have seen some good out of the Biden administration, but we have seen many things that are quite poor, including the expulsions and deportations of Black immigrants that has really increased in number. Specifically for Haitian folks, we have seen 33 flights, I believe, to date of Haitian folks who are expelled after crossing the southwestern border, seeking asylum in the United States and being denied every single one of them, including babies as young as 1 month old. And so that must stop. There's a thing called Title 42 that must stop, and we need it to end. Now, that's not a part of Congress. That's actually for the administration to do, but those things are important, and it's important that Congress hold a line on that as well. And then lastly, security and certainty for all immigrants. During COVID, we saw how essential that immigrants were and them as essential workers in the pandemic. And it's really important that we have security and certainty for each of us, which is a path to citizenship, which would then, I could give those suggestions, but I'll pause for you, Kelsey.
Thank you. Yeah, we can get right into that. And so while there are multiple bills in Congress that would put millions of undocumented immigrants on a pathway to citizenship, we lament and recognize that a pathway was not included in the American Jobs nor the American Families Plan. So I'm curious, what is the impact of that not being included in that plan? And how is UndocuBlack and the We Are Home campaign pushing our members of Congress to pass laws that would provide citizenship for our communities?
Thanks, Kelsey. Now, as you know, we've been waiting a really long time to be able to get citizenship. Many of us have been here for a decade, 2 decades, even more. One of my proudest moments actually was June 4th, 2019. I can't forget it. It was also Eid. Eid fell on that day, Eid al-Fitr. And we were in the gallery of the United States Congress celebrating and watching the passage of the vote on HR 6, the American Dream and Promise Act that would provide citizenship for millions of us, TPS holders, DACA holders, DED holders here in the United States. But one of my saddest moments, quite frankly, was last year when the calls started coming in about members of UndocuBlack themselves who had lost their lives to COVID, or family members of our members. And the fact that that included people who were with me in the gallery. There was one Liberian DED holder who was with me, Momalu, and he's no longer here, and he was not able to see through that what he fought for. So we've got options. And we're hoping that that Congress will pursue them. And so we are talking, UndocuBlack is a part of the campaign called We Are Home, as you know, and we are pushing that undocumented immigrants who have not had the luck or privilege to attain a legal or temporary status and are still in limbo, but have been at the forefront of COVID-19 to get a pathway to citizenship through this bill. That includes folks who are essential workers. So there's a bill called the Citizenship for Essential Workers. And so that includes or Uber drivers or doctors or lawyers or healthcare workers or home aid workers who have been a part of this economy and getting us back on our feet. And that also includes TPS holders who are included in HR 6, the Dream and Promise Act. So that includes our TPS holders, DED, DACA holders, and language around that has even made it more inclusive. So it's not just folks who have DACA now, but it's also young people who have not been able to attain that. Additionally, and one really key one is that it also changes the date of people's age. So you could be 18 and under in order to qualify under this bill. We expect that that actually lets in hundreds of thousands more individuals, especially Black immigrants who often became undocumented at the age of 18. Undocumented Black folks, as well as undocumented API folks who often, because of the fact patterns that surround or immigration status, became undocumented at the age of 18. We're also pushing for farm workers to be included in the bill because that bill was also passed out of the House in this Congress, the Farm Work Modernization Act. So between those subsets of people, we would cover between 5 to 6 million people. Now, of course, our dream is the full citizenship bill, but we understand that that may be a harder case to make for the recovery plan. But we do feel very strongly, and we are pushing that eventually and truly by this summer, should this bill be passed, it will include those populations that we mentioned. It will include Citizenship for Essential Workers, the Dream and Promise Act, and the Farm Work Modernization Act, so that finally I can say that we are home without the terrifying fear in the back of my mind that we could be detained and deported at any time.
Thank you, Patrice. We are fighting alongside the We Are Home campaign and UndocuBlack network, and there truly is no recovery. There is no holy recovery without citizenship and justice for immigrant communities. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story and the story of your community. So we have one more speaker with us today. We said before, an economy that serves all people and a democracy that represents all people go hand in hand. These are the two pillars of our Holy Recovery campaign. So I'm excited to welcome Sister Quincy Howard of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, who is a champion for voting rights and for the People Act, who has helped move it from being in the House to it being passed in the House, and now it's in the Senate and even has had a Senate committee hearing. So Sister Quincy, curious, our democracy is one of our core foundations of our nation, but is very fragile in this moment due to harmful politics of the last administration. And we're seeing attacks from many ends on the state level. So what makes the For the People Act so critical to restoring our democracy and being a part of a holy recovery alongside economic justice?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's true to form that this would be the last topic and sort of crunched for time because democracy often falls off the radar for folks because it doesn't have the same kind of immediate impactful effects on people's life like taxes do or like citizenship would, right? But it is really critical. It's foundational. It is the means for a holy recovery. Whatever creating a better world looks like to us, this is how we do it. This is the system available to us. And Americans in general, they do sense that there are some serious threats. The sort of post 2020 election being the primary example of front and center in people's minds. And I'm here to testify that the threats are dire and go beyond even what we see in the headlines. So we have threats to the freedom to vote. We have threats from big money and special interests. And we also have threats from unaccountable elected officials. And these are all areas that S1 would address through its reforms. We dodged a bullet in the 2020 election. And unfortunately, we are continuing to see how that big lie is unraveling our democratic systems, even as we're watching in horror. So I chalk it up to the work of the Holy Spirit that this bill emerged when it did in 2019, because it has reforms that address the really harmful trends that we've seen ramp up with the 2020 election and now afterwards. It is extremely pressing that we pass this bill this summer because on the short term, what is at stake is the 2022 election. In a very real and present way, because many of the states that are seeing the most grievous assaults on their voting rights are the same swing states that brought us President Biden and our Democratic majority in the Senate. So that is sort of the front and center threat that we are contending with. And we know, as was alluded to by Jennifer earlier, that the dark money groups are stepping into this space and they are really ramping up their efforts to make sure that not too many people of the wrong type are voting. In the midterm, I think a serious threat that is right around the corner is the redistricting process. And we need to pass S1 before that process starts in earnest in the states, because it does have reforms that would ban partisan gerrymandering and set up an alternative system for the redistricting process that is not partisan. And that's going to define the landscape of our politics for the next decade. And then just on the long term, there is not to be sort of blowing things out of proportion, but our democracy is literally at stake in an existential way right now, because passing these reforms is going to set their trajectory for how power is wielded in our country. Is it going to be by special interests and the wealthy, or will elected officials become accountable to the people and future generations are going to experience whatever trajectory we set? So it's coming to the head this summer, and to be able to impact that sort of immediate 2022 election as well as redistricting, we have to get this bill passed before August.
Thank you, Sister Quincy. Thank you for sharing us with the urgency of passing the For the People Act. It is a part of a holy recovery. It is the pinnacle piece of it alongside economic justice. These things are working hand in hand, and we're so grateful to be in partnership with you. And please check out Network's work on the For the People Act and the Faithful Democracy Coalition. Go to Faithful Democracy's website and learn more about that, and also be with us, Faith in Public Life, as we're advocating for the For the People Act as well. Thank you all of our speakers for, wow, what a panel. We heard this moral vision of what our communities and country can be. We heard from some policy experts and friends about how we can move closer to that vision. A holy recovery is a big vision. It's a big plan. There are things that we can do this year to make a big difference in people's lives. So I just want to throw up this slide as a reminder. Here are the priorities we are working on: care services, tax revenue, immigration, voting rights. We are pushing for the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, the For the People Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We believe that these are bills that can help bring us toward wholeness and true goodness for our communities. And we cannot do that without including our immigrant neighbors in a path to citizenship. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Really want to encourage everyone to please sign our petition for a holy recovery. So we are in the launching day of our campaign, and we are building toward the July recess. From now until then, we will be hosting media and messaging trainings, advocacy trainings, and we want to work with you to help you set up legislative meetings in your key districts with your senators so you can help advance this important agenda. When you add your name to this list, you're going to add your name to people across the country who are pushing for this, and we want to make deliveries of this petition during our July recess vigils, during our press conferences, and during our legislative meetings that we are counting on you to join us and help advance. So please add your name. It will go somewhere. It will go to the media. It will go to President Biden, and it will go to your members of Congress so they can see that people of faith broadly across the country are for a holy recovery that advances dignity and justice for all people. So that link is in the chat. Please sign it and share it today. And we can move to the next slide. We also have a new resource for you that we can put in the chat too, and that you'll receive an email automatically when you sign the petition. But this has an events calendar of our campaign. It has the messaging guide. Much of what I said came from there. We have social media, we have graphics, we have how to set up a legislative meeting and how to write an op-ed. It's really going to take all of us using all of our skills to help advance these policy priorities. So this is a resource guide for you to help you get there and for you to join us. So please take a look at that and download that today. I don't know, I think this is our last slide. Oh, and here's just some events that are coming up. So we'll keep you notified about all these things, but here's a few dates to keep in mind. Save the dates, mark your calendars. We'll be in touch about all of this. We're so excited to continue working with all the partners who have been on this call today. This work does not happen alone. Yes, and move to the next slide. If you're still with us, just real quick, let us know how you will take action. If you'll sign your name to the sign-on letter, if you'll organize a call-in day, if you'll join us for an advocacy training, or share your own idea. You're not alone in this work. We're here together to work as a community, and we will be in touch and want to work with you directly. So thank you, everybody, all of our speakers. Thank you, Reverend Butler, for helping cast this vision, and just grateful to be in partnership with you all as we work to build a holy recovery. So happy launch day, and keep following Faith and Public Life Action to stay to the latest on our campaign. Hope you all have a blessed day.